The United States has had a long line of presidents, each bringing their own unique style, challenges, and accomplishments to the office. Today, let's take a look at one interesting fact about every U.S. president, from George Washington to Joe Biden. George Washington, 1789 to 1797. Our very first president, George Washington, set a powerful precedent. He was the only U.S. president to be unanimously elected, and he voluntarily stepped down after 2 terms, establishing a tradition that would last until the 20th century. John Adams, 1797 to 1801. John Adams, Washington's successor, was the first president to live in the White House. Fun fact, he was also the father of a future president, John Quincy Adams. Thomas Jefferson, 1801 to 1809. Thomas Jefferson wasn't just a president, he was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. During his presidency, he doubled the size of the country with the Louisiana Purchase. James Madison, 1809 to 1817. James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution. He also led the country during the War of 1812 when the White House was burned by British forces. James Monroe, 1807 to 1825. James Monroe introduced the famous Monroe Doctrine, which warned European nations to stay out of the Americas, a policy that shaped U.S. foreign relations for years to come. John Quincy Adams, 1825 to 1829. Like father, like son. John Quincy Adams was the son of John Adams, and after his presidency, he had a unique career, serving in the U.S. Congress for many years. Andrew Jackson, 1829 to 1837. Andrew Jackson was a military hero and the founder of the Democratic Party. He also survived the first ever assassination attempt on a U.S. president. Martin Van Buren, 1837 to 1841. Van Buren has a distinction that might surprise you. He was the first president born as a U.S. citizen rather than a British subject. William Henry Harrison, 1841. William Henry Harrison holds the unfortunate title of the shortest presidency. He died just 31 days after taking office. John Tyler, 1841 to 1845. John Tyler was the first vice president to become president due to the death of a sitting president. After Harrison's death, Tyler set a new precedent for vice presidential succession. James K. Polk, 1845 to 1849. Polk was known for expanding the United States more than any other president. His administration oversaw the annexation of Texas and the acquisition of California and much of the Southwest. Zachary Taylor, 1849 to 1850. A career military man, Zachary Taylor was a hero of the Mexican-American War, but his presidency was cut short when he died unexpectedly after just 16 months in office. Millard Fillmore, 1850 to 1853. Millard Fillmore signed the Compromise of 1850 into law, attempting to ease tensions between free and slave states. Franklin Pierce, 1853 to 1857. Pierce's presidency is often remembered for the controversial Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed new states to decide if they would allow slavery. James Buchanan, 1857 to 1861. Buchanan is often ranked among the worst presidents, as his inaction during the escalating tensions over slavery contributed to the outbreak of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, 1861 to 1865. Abraham Lincoln led the country through its greatest internal crisis, the Civil War. He is also known for issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, which began the process of freeing enslaved people. Andrew Johnson, 1865 to 1869. After Lincoln's assassination, Andrew Johnson became the first president to be impeached, though he was acquitted by 1 vote in the Senate. Ulysses S. Grant, 1869 to 1877. The Civil War hero Ulysses S. Grant served 2 terms and worked to protect the rights of newly freed African Americans during Reconstruction. Rutherford B. Hayes, 1877 to 1881. Hayes ended Reconstruction by withdrawing federal troops from the South in exchange for disputed electoral votes that secured his presidency. James A. Garfield, 1881. Garfield's presidency was tragically short. He was assassinated just 200 days into his term. Chester A. Arthur, 1881 to 1885. Arthur is known for reforming the civil service with the Pendleton Act, which introduced merit-based hiring for government jobs. Grover Cleveland, 1885 to 1889. Cleveland is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, making him both the 22nd and 24th president. Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893. Benjamin Harrison, the grandson of President William Henry Harrison, signed into law the Sherman Antitrust Act, the first federal act to outlaw monopolistic business practices. William McKinley, 1897 to 1901. McKinley led the U.S. to victory in the Spanish-American War, but was assassinated early in his second term. Theodore Roosevelt, 1901 to 1909. Theodore Roosevelt, one of the most dynamic presidents, championed progressive reforms and is known for his role in building the Panama Canal. William Howard Taft, 1909 to 1913. Taft is the only president to later serve as Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Woodrow Wilson, 1913 to 1921. Wilson led the U.S. through World War I and was a key figure in the founding of the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations. Warren G. Harding, 1921 to 1923. Harding's presidency is remembered for the Teapot Dome scandal, one of the biggest corruption scandals in U.S. history. Calvin Coolidge, 1923 to 1929. Coolidge, known for his quiet demeanor, believed in limited government and presided over a period of economic growth known as the Roaring Twenties. Herbert Hoover, 1929 to 1933. Hoover was in office when the Great Depression began, and his policies were largely blamed for failing to address the crisis. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. FDR is the only president to serve 4 terms, leading the country through the Great Depression and World War II. Harry S. Truman, 1945 to 1953. Truman made the decision to drop atomic bombs on Japan, ending World War II, and helped shape post-war international relations. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1953 to 1961. Eisenhower, a World War II hero, created the interstate highway system and presided over a period of peace and prosperity. John F. Kennedy, 1961 to 1963. JFK is remembered for the Cuban Missile Crisis and his inspiring vision for America, including setting the goal of landing a man on the moon. Lyndon B. Johnson, 1963 to 1969. LBJ's Great Society programs aimed to eliminate poverty and racial injustice, but his presidency was overshadowed by the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon, 1969 to 19. Nixon opened relations with China and ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam, but his presidency was brought down by the Watergate scandal. Gerald Ford, 1974 to 1977. Ford is the only person to serve as both vice president and president without being elected to either office. Jimmy Carter, 1977 to 1981. Known for his work in human rights, Carter brokered the Camp David Accords, a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. Ronald Reagan, 1981 to 1989. Reagan, a former actor, is credited with helping to end the Cold War and is known for his conservative economic policies, known as Reaganomics. George H.W. Bush, 1909 to 1993. Bush led the U.S. during the Gulf War and oversaw the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. Bill Clinton, 1993 to 2001. Clinton presided over a period of economic expansion, but his presidency was marred by scandal, leading to his impeachment by the House of Representatives. George W. Bush, 2001 to 2009. Bush's presidency was defined by the 9/11 attacks and the subsequent war on terror, including wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Barack Obama, 2009 to 2017. Obama was the first African-American president and passed the Affordable Care Act, providing health care coverage to millions. Donald Trump, 2021. Trump's presidency was highly polarizing, and he became the first president to be impeached twice, though he was acquitted both times. Joe Biden, the oldest person to assume the presidency, came into office during the COVID-19 pandemic and is focused on an economic and public health challenges. And that's just a glimpse of the 46 men who have held the highest office in the United States.